Did you know it took the ancient Greeks 3 days to perform funerary rites and have a body be properly prepared before a soul was meant to go to the underworld? Hi, if you're new here, my name is Lady Aria. I am a Hellenic polytheist, Chthonic practitioner, and King Hades devotee. And if you watched my video from earlier regarding as to why Charon, the ferryman to the underworld, did not take everybody into Hades, I did briefly mention in that video the importance of the funerary rites and burial practices the ancient Greeks took a part of in order for a soul to be able to get into Hades and for Charon to take them. So let's get into it. So the ancient Greeks had very specific and detailed methods of how they were preparing a body before the body was buried or cremated. Rites and rituals would take up to 3 days, as well as allowing family members and loved ones to show honor to the deceased, because it was an act of hubris if you did not honor the dead properly, especially as they are making the transition over if they just previously died. If a body did not have a proper burial, the spirit of that individual would be considered restless and would not be taken by Charon the ferryman at the shores of Styx or Charon to be brought into Hades. Keep in mind, based on the time that somebody had on their hands or whatever the case may be, some of the rituals and rites within this practice could have been modified to get a body prepared as soon as possible, with still giving them the proper respect and ownership so that they wouldn't become restless in the afterlife. So let's get into it. So as I mentioned earlier, the preparation and burial rites would take up to 3 days. This would include the preparation of the deceased, which would be preparing the body, lying in response, which would basically be the funeral itself, and the third day would be known as, and forgive me if I'm butchering these words, pyritepnon and necrotepnon, which would basically be a final supper to have as like a festivity to celebrate that loved one being deceased. As well as the upcoming weeks, they would also celebrate that deceased being as well, known as Trita and Eta and Treakada, which would be like the 30th day, as well as a 1-year anniversary. And then yearly we would have the festival Antisteria, which we just had a couple months ago back in February. So the preparation of the body was pretty important. Eyes were always closed. Any family member would usually wash the body with warm water, wine, rubbed with oil and myrrh. Olive leaves or laurel leaves would be placed on the body of the deceased, along with wrapping them in white linen, and the deceased individual will be wearing a crown of gold, silver, bronze, or maybe even seasonal flowers. I do have images that would show a little bit about what this would have looked like. Along with preparing the body in white linen, they would also cover the face and cover it with jewels and ribbons. And you may know from my previous video, the necessity of opal coins having to be present with the body. So that can be the payment to Charon when they are meeting him at the shore of Styx or Acheron. So they would put it inside the mouth of the deceased, under the tongue, as well as iterations saying that there had to be 2 over the eyes. Now, the lying in response would kind of be like a modern day wake. It would be how as we know today, our loved ones, family members are gathered around a deceased body and showing their respects. This would tend to happen on the day of the death. Usually would take up to 24 hours. And it would also take place inside their own home. We don't really see happen too much today, but it's pretty interesting how we can see that practice from ancient times be brought into the modern day wake. Now, the actual burial would take place on the 3rd day. And the transportation of the deceased had to be in a certain order, from the woman leading the entire line with a vessel, a koes, which I believe is red wine, followed by a band of musicians, then the deceased, then family, and then lastly to follow would be friends. So around the burial, they would give offerings to psychopomps such as Hermes, Hecate, and chthonic deities such as King Hades or Pluton. And they would present these offerings and say their rites. And as the body was being put into the ground or even cremation, they would place olives or parsley leaves onto the chest, have the body be in a supine position, pour libations onto the ground, have more funerary speeches, and be sure to cleanse themselves after they leave and the process is finished. Now, the funeral supper, the necrodepnon, would basically be a giant dinner in celebration of the deceased and their departure from this world. And if any like crumbs or specks of food were to fall on the ground, they would be gathered up and put on top of the grave. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Let me know if you want me to make a video about the modifications that they had to do when they didn't have any time on their hands. Be sure to like and follow. I love making these videos for you guys. Okay, bye.